Um, Hello, welcome everybody. I would like to give you a warm welcome to everybody present here and also the people who are just following this online. So say hello to everybody. My name is Nuria Frail. I work at the Data Lab as a product manager for the Data Skill for Work initiative, which is part delivered for the Data Skills Gateway and the Data Lab. My role is to address the digital and data skills gap by designing upskilling and reskilling courses. And I'm passionate for accessibility and things like that because I am autistic. I would like to give a big thanks as well to Product Forge for providing the live stream. And a little bit of housekeeping. I mean, I've got everything scripted here. There is no planned fire alarm, so if you hear the alarm, please just leave via the nearest exit, as I'm assuming is the main one. Yeah. Well, I'm very excited about this event, to be honest with you, because we will hear experiences and challenges and successes as well of neurodivergent professionals working in data and artificial intelligence. We're going to see all the benefits, for example, of embracing alternative perspective and ways of working with us, and you know, very excited as well to see the topics of today. Just to say that this event is obviously part of the Data Lab community, and it was created in June 2021 to enable data and artificial intelligence professionals and enthusiasts to connect, to collaborate, learn, and grow. The community is also a very welcome space for anyone who works in data and AI or simply has an interest in this field. But, we do have a group for neurodivergent people in data and AI exclusively, and I'm part of this, and also a mentoring program, which I'm also a mentor for autistics and ADHDers in the beginning of their data career. So please join us in our community and be the first to know. There's a lot of things happening, and it's really exciting. So let me, now I know I'm talking a lot, so let me introduce to our host for this evening, which is Lee Hutchinson, which is a job coach at Oticon and has over decades worth of experience in Scotland supporting individuals with autism and other neurodivergent conditions in employability, health, and education. Just a big applause.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to pass it to each of the panelists just to introduce themselves, and if you're happy to kind of share your insight and experience with neurodiversity. So Irina.
Hi everyone, I'm Irina. I have a background in corporate finance and finally made it to where I think I belong, and that is in tech and data. And it's been quite a long journey. And I'm currently in a kind of final stages of a master's degree, doing data science. And at the same time working at Oticon, which is a company that employs autistic people and helps them into different roles in data and tech. And I'm autistic. And now I have it on my CV as well, so I don't need to worry about disclosing further. So that's sorted. And I brought a little statement with me to share and read about what autism is for me. It's a natural neurological variation amongst humans and a much needed neurotype in the workplace. It's about how my brain works, how I think and communicate, how I process information, and it has differences in sensory experiences. And that's about it for me.
My name is Ewan Mason. I'm a data engineer at the Data Shed and have been for a year and a half. And about a year ago, I found out I had ADHD and got diagnosed. I kind of had an idea for a while that I might have it, But it wasn't until about a year before that I even thought that ADHD might be something I had. And someone mentioned it to me, and I ended up getting the going through a diagnosis process. And yeah, life has improved a fair bit since then, but there's still challenges I have to face.
Hi, I'm Jen Gates. I'm a recovering project manager / feral Tableau developer because I can't work out how to describe what it is I do. I'm just coming out of 20 odd years in financial services and now trying to find my way forward from there. I was diagnosed with ADHD 2, maybe 3 years ago. I kind of forget. My daughter also has several neurodivergent conditions, so it kind of runs strongly in our family.
Thanks, everyone. So, for all of you who's obviously working in data, could you kind of provide some insights into the barriers and challenges you've faced in your career so far?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned that it's been a long journey to get to where I think I belong, because when I was a teenager, which was some time ago, I used to spend a lot of time taking my computer apart and building it back together. And also I spent an awful lot of time trying to understand the world of the internet. But then I lacked role models. And when I say role models, it wasn't somebody who's the CTO of the year, but somebody who's much more tangible and much more similar to me. So I never thought that that's an actual path in a career that I could take. So I took a little bit of a different path, and I went into finance first. And then I got the opportunity to work into tech startups, where I got a bit closer to where I should have been. And that gave me the opportunity to get connected with the field and kind of feel the synergy and get back into that. So that would be one of the biggest challenge, which I think still exists today for a lot of the neurodivergent people, a lack of role models that may resonate with them. The other thing that I found quite difficult, I guess, for me, I need quite a lot of certainty before I get to do something. And somehow the roles in data and AI have this intangible feel to them. Like it's very difficult to tell what a machine learning engineer does. I can interact with a product that has at the back of it an AI system. And I can have a very vague idea of how that might have been put together, but it's not necessarily very visible. These are not very visible roles. And I think that's still very much a challenge from the conversations I've also had with other colleagues on the master's degree that I am in.
Yeah, one of the things I've found most difficult is kind of being consistent, especially going through like university and things. You're kind of expected to keep up a consistent flow of work, and as things like get to the end of the year, you're kind of pushing more and more. And if you're not being consistent, you can fall behind, and then you kind of question yourself, like, why am I falling behind? Am I not good enough? And then you push yourself more, and it can very quickly lead to burnout. So I got burnt out pretty much every year at uni, and then I got reset, and then when I got into the workforce, I didn't have that time to reset, and so it just kind of got worse and worse. So that's probably the biggest thing for me that's come up.
Okay, so in terms of, I guess, barriers, there's a short answer and a long answer to this. Bear with me, because some of you won't like the short answer. The biggest barrier I've had in my career is middle-aged white guys. So when I started my career in financial services and operations, I worked for a female who gave me incredible amounts of context, helped me with planning, helped me with prioritization. So I never knew I had a problem. I didn't know I had ADHD in any way, because I had an incredibly supportive manager who was able to give me the tools that I needed to be able to succeed. And I was at my most successful and my most happy with this incredible woman. Then I had 7 male managers in 5 years, and everything went to shit. Sorry, Steve, with the swearing. And it's not because they were male in some way. They had a different way of communicating. They could craft beautiful visions and strategic ideas. My tiny ADHD brain was going, yeah, but what am I doing? What is it you actually want here? So I think I found over time it's actually that the people have been barriers to my career rather than processes or lacks of tools or things that I had to do. It's how people have supported me in my career.
Sorry, buddy.
So let's kind of talk about some of like the biggest misconceptions there is around sort of neurodiversity. But if you kind of would have to maybe pick out just the one, maybe sort of in workplace or kind of wider society, what would you kind of want to highlight, Marina?
Yeah, for me is the phrase, and this is quite a basic phrase, you do not look autistic. And that takes several variations in the workplace as well, more like, I see no difference, we all have something, it goes hand in hand with we're all on the spectrum. And at first, it was very challenging for me to deal with that, and I would just laugh and not continue the conversation, and I still don't think I found the right answer yet. But what I want to say is that the impact from certain statements like that is that basically people get their experience invalidated, and that can have consequences in kind of curtailing their confidence and embracing the identity that they have. And so we do know that autism does not have a look. Autistic people come from all walks of life, irrespective of age, gender, ethnicity, belief system that they might have.
Yeah, for me, it's probably more of just a general one rather than a particular workplace one. It's people just say, well, are you just lazy? Why don't you just focus? Why don't you just do the work? And quite often it's just, that's not what I can do. And people, they can't really comprehend that your brain works differently. It's like, well, you look fine. Again, you look fine. You can do the work most of the time. Well, you were great last week. Why can't you do it now, right now? And it just, the ADHD brain is amazing in so many ways, but sometimes you can't get the work done right there and then. You need to take a break and move on.
I guess it's similar, actually. It's about that external perception of things. It is, you don't look like there's anything wrong with you. So I've had conversations where I've asked if there are any accommodations for disabled people, and the answer was, oh yeah, there's things for people in wheelchairs. And it's like, that's not where that conversation begins and ends. So it's very much that external, what people expect to see, and also the behaviours, even when they do have some understanding of neurodivergence. Like, I do get at hyper pace. I'm keeping it quite cool at the moment, but I've had conversations where people thought they had to speak more slowly to me because they're talking really fast. I'll speak slower, that'll help. You not speaking was probably the answer to that problem. So I think that's some of the things, is how it looks and feels. It's a problem.
Kind of on the other side, could you maybe share like a positive sort of like experience in the workplace that you see as perhaps like a good example of like how accommodations can be really supportive and help you be at your best in workplaces?
Sure. I guess the biggest change to my life was working from home, which didn't come on the back of me being autistic and exercising the right. It was, as we all know, on the back of a tragedy. But that fundamentally changed my life for the best in improving the quality of my life. And it allows me to have enough time to decompress or kind of not feel like I need to be all the time looking perfect. So yeah, that's kind of the thing that I would say.
For me, it's very similar. It's working from home is giving me so many like benefits that you wouldn't think of. Even getting like the extra hour in bed, getting like a better sleep schedule because you have that extra time. Being able to take breaks and do something that truly relaxes you, whereas if you're in the office, going off for a walk is sometimes seen as a negative. Whereas if I'm at home and need to take a break, I can go out for a walk, I can go into another room, step away from work without feeling that people are judging me. So yeah, working from home's been a massive thing.
I think for me, when I got access to a workplace assessment, which I know not every company probably does, and people who are freelance don't have access to this, so it's quite privileged, but I got a workplace assessment that got me an executive function coach. I don't think it was as successful as she would have wanted, but the best thing she did was explain my own brain to me, because nobody had ever paused and went, your brain does this because, and I'm quite literal, I needed to know that. So having somebody that I could talk to in that context and who understood it almost scientifically, I think helped me a lot to then be able to work out what tools I needed or how I needed to manage things, or the days when you just go, no, absolutely not, as well. So that helped me.
Excellent. So what would employers or teams or organizations get from embracing sort of neurodivergent talent? I feel this one could probably take up the rest of the hour, but what would you kind of say, Rena?
Well, I guess we hear a lot that diversity of thought is a key factor in building performant teams. But what does that exactly mean? For me, it means that we can progress projects and deliver them in a way that is innovative. For me, it means that we can complement each other as long as we understand our differences and accept our differences. And it means that we can challenge each other, which is really important, and it's an underrated approach in teams sometimes. People avoid the conflicts, but it's not about the conflict in itself, it's about challenging the other person's idea, or even sometimes even for testing their ideas, not necessarily to kind of not go along with the idea. And at the same time, it's about, as long as we can understand our differences, pick each other up, because we all have bad days, and it's about that as well. And I have a personal belief that ADHD and autism complement each other very well in the workplace.
I think data in particular is all about problem solving. And when you have problems and then diverse people trying to solve it, you get diverse outcomes. Because everyone's going to come up to their own challenges throughout life, and the more diverse that is, the more different challenges people have come across, and therefore more likely to be able to solve a challenge or a problem in the best way possible, especially working in a team. So that accounts for people that are neurodivergent, non-neurodivergent, or anything, just different backgrounds, everything different can allow you to have developed problem-solving skills in a different way, which, yeah, can really help.
I guess, yeah, everything these guys said, they've kind of covered my point. I think it's, and you touched on it there, when you talk about embracing neurodivergent people, we're just going to feel better. We're just going to be happier, and the chances are we might do more work. Like, generally, if someone makes me feel better, that makes me do more work than throwing money at me. Also, what Irina said about being part of a community, like, I came here this evening, my anxiety was through the roof. These guys walked in, we all went a little bit weird for 5 minutes, and I felt so much better. So I think having spaces where you've got people who are similar and you don't feel like the outsider quite so much are super important.
I suppose for you and Jan, kind of what benefits would you say in particular like ADHD kind of brings to an organisation, and how has perhaps your ADHD been a kind of strength for you, maybe working on a project or a task in particular?
I can get really into projects, and one of the things I dislike doing is something repetitive. It's a particular ADHD thing. You hate repetitive tasks, so I quite often pick up on tasks that could potentially be automated, and so I'll maybe program a script that will automate that part of the project, and then it will speed up the production of the code. But yeah, also I feel like with ADHD, sometimes you're more able to take a step back from the project you're working on and kind of look at it from outside perspective, which can be really helpful.
I still haven't worked out how it ties in with my ADHD, but I'm an absolute context junkie. Like, I'm like, why is the sky blue? And I'm going to ask that 5 times till I get a good answer. And I think obviously that's good in things like UX design and problem solving, is keep asking that why question, and just being a pain in the arse about it. Like, Harvard are selling courses on design thinking right now, and it's all about asking all these questions. It's basically an ADHD brain. That's all Harvard are talking about there. So I think it's that curiosity and that moving curiosity, and in some cases a bit of hyper-focus as well, I think makes us valuable assets.
For yourself, Irina, in relation to autism?
Yeah, sure. One of the things I've observed is I basically create order into chaos. And that worked really well for all the startups I worked in, because that is what you get when you go into startups, which is lovely. It's great. I loved it. Except for all the changing parts, which do trigger me a lot. But basically, I came into no role, and I created by the end a role with very detailed, clear processes. So that's one of the things. The other thing is I am very honest and very transparent, and that's the way I communicate to people. This one definitely got me into trouble more than once. Somehow it's an underrated ability. I don't know why, but I'm very perseverant, so I will always push on that. I also like to challenge the status quo, kind of goes hand in hand with being honest and transparent. So yeah, I think that's kind of the things I would mention.
Excellent. So back to you again, Irina. So like kind of in your experience, how can organizations best support kind of neurodivergent talent working in data in particular?
So I guess there's two parts here that I can think of. One is the baseline support, so more generalistic support in the organization with like having the knowledge about what neurodivergence is or neurodiversity in general. Having access to assistive technology. I use a lot of assistive technology. Training the managers on these aspects and making sure that they are on board and aligned. And then I think the most important part is really having a mechanism of support that is a bit more bespoke to each neurotype, if possible. And this is where the support system is a little bit in the smaller team, I would say. And it would be done either by a manager that would be quite knowledgeable and understanding, or have access to coaching that works for the particular person.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like having good managers is a very high up priority you should have. And sort of going off what you said earlier, making you feel like a human, like a real person when you're coming to them with these issues really helps, because like when I looked it up online, it's like, should you ask your manager or should you tell your manager if you have ADHD? Everywhere said, no, don't do it, because they can, you can then be sort of pushed out the job. But I was like, no, I think my manager will be fine with it. And he was great and really helped me through it and said, like, if you need anything, like, go for it, but you're just another part of the team, nothing changes, which was really, really helpful for me.
I think, yeah, generalised, Irina, you touched on a lot of things I was going to say. We should have thought about this in the order. The one thing I would say as well is sometimes is you need to ask what people need. There is a lot of tools out there, and it should be bespoke, and it should be a case of going, what is it you actually need? I think the other concept that is important is that it doesn't stop and start at the office door. So things like your commute, finding a parking space, these are all unbearable for neurotypical people. Add that on top for neurodiverse people. And there's kind of, I've experienced an attitude where I was like, well, it's not our problem. You're not in the office. And it's like, yeah, but it's your problem when I come in the office. And once again, my anxiety is through the roof as well. So it's expanding that idea that I have seen in some spaces that we only care about it if it relates to your work. I think just in terms of data specifically, what I am finding with just being a data visualizer is it's coming across a little bit like it's very specific skill sets. Like, you can't be a visualizer. If you're a visualizer, you can't be an analysis person. Great grammar. You can't be an engineer. You have to have these technical skill sets in some way. And I think certainly for neurodivergent people, we've got all the skill sets to do all of it. So we need to stop it being so siloed, tool and technology orientated. Just go, actually, you're brilliant at all of these things. We'll find a tool that works for us.
Probably for people that are in this room today to kind of take away, how do we kind of create sort of working environments that are sort of supportive of neurodivergent individuals, but kind of foster inclusivity and sort of understanding?
Sure. I have a 3-point framework. First comes understanding, then comes acceptance, and then comes compromise. The understanding phase is the most important, and I believe when somebody comes into a team, for example, it needs to be done, like, the time needs to be invested, basically, which is very rarely that I see in the teams I work. And proactively trying to understand the strengths and the challenges of the person. I also have kind of template that I built for myself. I got inspiration from somebody else on LinkedIn, I think it was, where I say, this is the things I'm good at. This is not the things that I'm not good at. This is how I would prefer people to work with me. So I think initiatives like this can kind of bring that level of understanding in within a team. The acceptance part needs to happen on both sides about how we complement each other and how we can work better together. And then there needs to be a compromise.
Well, you've just gone and covered everything there, haven't you? Yeah. One of the things that the Data Shed have done is they get people in to do talks every now and again. And one of those was about neurodiversity, and everyone sort of goes on the team's call and listens to it from someone. I think they're from some sort of neurodiversity charity, and it just kind of explains it to everyone. And then if you're going to these things and see people who have these like ADHD or autism, and you see them being normal and just like everyone else, and then understanding it a bit more, it can really sort of change perspective slowly.
I think I must have been having a pessimistic moment with this one because I've got no answer. Working environments are fundamentally capitalist and therefore not supportive for neurodivergent people was what I wrote down. And I thought that's a bit much. So I get generally everything as usual. These guys have covered it. I'm kind of regretting coming at the end.
Yours is realistic. Wishful thinking.
It is a little bit just feeling a little bit down on the world, and I can't see the answers how to do that. But listening to these guys, and again, hopefully, if we get to chat later with anyone else here, you'll all restore my faith in humanity.
I suppose this kind of leads into the next question: is have you seen things evolve for the better in terms of working environments?
I'm neutral, and I'm going to explain. But what I want to say first, and the most important thing that I celebrate every day, is I see an evolution in myself, in the sense that I'm not ashamed anymore of being autistic, and I can bring myself like that in the workplace, irrespective of the consequences. And if I can bring myself like that into the workplace, then change and progress will happen. And many others will do the same. I'm confident in that. But I'm neutral because the onus is always onto me to justify myself and to ask for things. And that's why there's a lot of good things happening, definitely. And it's everybody can see a lot of information on the social media about neurodivergence, neurodiversity. But still, I think we have a lot of things to do.
I think especially ADHD has come more to the forefront in the last couple of years. I think the lockdown, a lot of people were spending a lot more time online, and I think especially things like TikTok. I know I went on it during lockdown, and it really finds your niche. And all of a sudden I started getting ADHD videos, and I was like, oh, why do these all relate to me? Obviously, because I've got ADHD, but I think more people started to see these, and I know quite a few of my friends are now starting to look for diagnoses either in ADHD or autism. It just feels like the last couple of years since everyone went online and started talking about their experiences, it's changing everyone's perspective, including in the workplace.
I think you guys have perked me up, definitely. I have seen some absolute clangers, but I think what I am kind of cognizant of is not a lot of it is done maliciously. People don't know what they don't know, and they make mistakes. There is a lack of awareness there. And I'm laughing at my own notes that I wrote, or empathetic things. I don't know what I was going to go on to there, but potentially just a lack of empathy. And everyone's just human, and we've started people treating like the fact that the title is human resources is we're just treated like you know, you could be a bit of wood, basically. So I think if we can encourage people past those things, it will improve. Some maybe still neutral-ish, but you are perking me up, definitely, guys. Thank you.
So kind of applying for jobs and going through an organisation's kind of recruitment process can be an incredibly stressful period, to kind of say the least. How can we reduce the stress for sort of neurodivergent candidates?
For me, the recruitment process is very stressful. And when I came to the tech and data field, I was like, I'm never going to get a job. Because some of the recruitment processes there have like 10 stages. Even just to comprehend all of that, to me, it takes the whole energy. And I haven't quite figured out, but what I will do now that I'm so confident in being autistic is that I will be demanding and I will go and ask for what I need. And if the organization isn't kind of inclined to negotiate or bespoke their recruitment process to suit around my needs, then I'm just not going to go with that organization. So I think there needs to be flexibility. There is no one size fits all. The organization will have a structure, and then we should have the ability to say yes to this, no to this, I want this first, and then this second, this kind of stage. But for me, it's important to have that informal conversation when the conversation happens, rather than trying to appear that I have the best soft skills ever, although I have worked very hard on them by this point. So yeah, having that understanding of having more practical parts for someone who's autistic and having a more informal conversation.
I think having more direct contact, a lot of things seem to be implied when you're at an interview or you're getting an email about a job. It seems a lot of it's implied rather than direct, or there'll be a lot of text and I'll skim through it, catch a few things and be like, yep, need to do that. And then I send those things away and then I realise I've missed things because it was a large bit of text I didn't want to read. And yeah, I picked out what things I could and forgot about the rest. Or I'll pick out the things and then forget. So even having like a reminder, oh, you've not sent this, or if you could do this, that'd be great. But yeah, more direct communication would be ideal.
I think bin off CVs and interviews altogether. I don't know anyone who actually thinks they present themselves at their best in a 2-page CV or a competency-based interview. I don't know what the replacement for it is, but I would get rid of those. I think, again, Irina touched on something earlier about like people profiles. So thinking about people rather than skill sets. So like having a people profile that said like Jen likes swearing, puppies and games with magnets. Would that be more useful to somebody to understand the person and not the skill set they get? And yes, the skill set comes into it somewhere along the way. But I think there's quite a fundamental change. In the interim, yes, let's have the adjustments and the ability to be asking for different things that suit us better, I think.
So do you have any advice for maybe people who are starting their careers in data or AI, and anything that you'd wish you'd known sooner?
I guess two components, I guess, that I didn't know much about when I first started in my career, and then it took me quite a while to get confident to go for it, is community and mentoring. And luckily the Data Lab the Data Lab community offers both. For me, mentoring works better because I prefer a one-to-one. That's where there's more learning for me and easier as an autistic person. But these would be two components that I would suggest to anybody to try to find to kind of progress.
I think one of the things that's helped me the most is not to be afraid to take a break. Not like a week-long break, but during your work hours, if you're not being able to focus and you know it's not you just wanted to go on your phone or something, go take that walk like I talked about earlier. That really makes a big difference. And kind of on that, as much as I hate to say it, doctors are right, exercise does help. And ADHD people in particular, you kind of have to be healthy in your normal life outside of work, because it seems to be that work and normal life is very much intertwined, because your focus is not going to be there if you're not sleeping well, you're not exercising, and then yeah, you're pushing yourself at work because your focus is slipping. So yeah, work and home life is a lot more intertwined than you might think.
Things that I wasn't aware of and I am now, so I've taken this quite literally, is there is more support than people are made aware of out there. So there's a whole thing called Access to Work, which is, while painful form filling, can provide you with funding that will get you things like virtual assistants, which will then help you with sending your CVs and remembering to do all of your tasks. If you're entering into like big organizations, discover their workplace assessment, reasonable adjustments, policies and those kind of things. You shouldn't have to, by the way. It should be handed to everybody on the first day, but I had to go digging for mine. And or ask someone to help you with finding out there is more support than I think is talked about out there. It's not perfect. It doesn't do all of the jobs we need it to, but definitely find out what those mechanisms are around you that can help you get on with your career.
So for kind of our last question before we open it up, like what would be your suggestion or tip for people kind of listening here or online to kind of help continue fostering that sort of atmosphere of inclusivity and understanding today?
So I guess we need to stay mindful that each person could be at a different stage in their journey in understanding neurodiversity, and it's good to be curious and understand where they might be or what they're exploring and kind of either help with that or share our own experiences and knowledge, I guess.
I think if you're talking with someone who's got ADHD, autism, who's neurodivergent, and you just act like they're a normal person because they are a normal person, it really sort of shows that to other people, because someone in the office may be like, oh, they've got autism, they're a bit weird, or ADHD, they're a bit weird, and then they see other people just having normal conversations with normal people, and they will maybe go, okay, maybe it is more normal than I've thought, and so just show that it's normal.
I think I'm in my goth era on this one again. I was trying to think about how to. You have to understand how feeling excluded and marginalised feels if you are not in that group. The best example I can was if you are neurotypical, you don't have any of these needs. Imagine you're in a meeting and every time you open your mouth, everyone acts like you didn't speak. They keep talking, you keep raising your voice, you're waving your hands. Somebody makes the point you were going to make. Meeting goes on like this, meeting ends. After that, your boss says to you, you didn't contribute at that meeting. Imagine that as for you or for a family member, that's what feeling excluded and marginalised is like, and use that as a starting point to go, how am I going to make people not feel like that in some way? And also, rainbows and things just to cheer that up a little bit.
Thank you very much. So I think there's questions. Yes.
Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Hi. Thanks all for your talk. It was really interesting. So I guess you made some interesting points in a lot of things you said about, I guess, sort of like at the start, it was like ways of work that can improve the quality of work. And towards the end, Jen sort of mentioned the exclusionary sort of stuff. And a lot of the things you talked about were about improving your work performance. But a lot of the recommendations or things you talked about, working from home, slightly different hours, are inherently isolating because you're now you're not with your colleagues, you're sort of separate from them, etc. Do you have a sense that is there a way? I'm trying to think this through as I'm going through it. Is there a way in which these processes could hinder, insofar as whatever 29% of people who are non-neurotypical are employed, but more of them are significantly depressed, and I think isolation, not being able to like natively be where other people are or being excluded from them exacerbates this to an effect. So I guess it's a bit rambling question, but do you have thoughts on that, sort of the counterpoints of that?
So essentially it is working from home counterproductive to mental health, I suppose.
Yes and no. I think I worked from home long before pandemic forced us all to work from home and thought I was absolutely fine with it. And what I found over time was I needed people to talk at and my husband doesn't know anything about data. So I did feel that isolation as well. On the flip side of that, when we started returning to offices and those kind of things, I went in and was just like, this is horrible, because it was like the overwhelm of having the people around me again. So for me, it's a very fine balance. And I have said now, looking for others, I'm quite happy to do hybrid, because I do think I work better talking to people. Like, I'm like you, I don't read long pieces of information. So people would send me links going, just read this. I'm like, I'm not reading that. So I think for me personally, it's a fine balance. Sometimes being in the office will make everything worse, and I'll want to just go home and cry. But other times for a specific task, it definitely helped me do things much better.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I think hybrid's probably the way to go. Going into the office sometimes, and also like having events that you can go to. Like the office has events, so you can meet with your co-workers out with a work environment. Obviously, sometimes you don't want to go to an event if it's after work and you just want to chill that night, but it can help just to like see your colleagues. You form more of a bond then. So yeah, you still get the benefits of seeing people while also being able to stay at home.
Yeah, I guess I'm very biased here because I love to be on my own. It's the perfect environment for me. However, in the workplace, I do recognize, same as you mentioned, that a hybrid is a better solution. And I have been considering it quite a lot. But as long as there is, again, the compromise with the people in your team, and you find that way that works for your team, I think work from home 100% can work. But there needs to be initiative from people to check in with the other people and kind of offer that support and understanding.
Anyone got any other questions? Sharon?
Hello everyone, thanks for sharing all your experiences. I had a question about assistive technologies. Irina, you mentioned that's been really useful for you, and Jen, you mentioned that for an ADHD brain, having a virtual assistant kind of software can be really helpful. Obviously, what different people will find helpful will vary according to individual need. But I just wondered if it would be nice to share some of the assistive technologies that people have found useful that might spark ideas for maybe some people in the audience that think, oh, I've never thought of that, that might help me as well.
What technologies have you found helpful or are using currently?
So from my side, I'm a visual thinker, so I need to mind map. I need to put every piece of information in a mind, well, not every piece, but multiple pieces of information into a mind map, and that's how I assimilate information. And so I use corresponding application that helps me do that. Also, when I'm very new into a team, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of everything that I absorb. So when I'm in a big meeting, I can't necessarily focus on everybody's point or keep a track of what's happening. So I use a transcriber type of application, and then I go back to that and look for keywords and kind of try to make sense of things in my own time and how it works for me. And I also am the kind of person that likes to collect a lot of information and knowledge, so I have content management applications. And I use a lot of task management systems because I like to do things in a very methodical way.
Yeah, transcription is very helpful, but also like simple things like using a to-do app and having like a to-do list. And it's probably not like assistive technology, but noise cancelling headphones have been amazing for me, just amazing.
It's not strictly technology, but I've used, lost my words, a body doubling service, which is not the same as body shots, it's not creepy, which is basically just sitting on a Zoom call with other people while they do work. So there's an organisation called Flown, do it with a paid subscription, but I'm sure people could do it themselves. And literally all you do is get on Zoom, you've got 1 hour, you can do a little bit of this is what I'm going to work on. And I just found having somebody kind of sitting there, and you don't look at each other, it's very difficult to explain. It triggers a little bit of something, particularly for those home working and finding it isolating. And I think I've had it, like I did a session with my coach one day and we talked about me having to send this email. And I'm like, I'm not sending this email, I'm not doing it. And she went, I'm just going to sit here while you do it. And the switch that was flicked from being adamant that I couldn't cope with sending this email, it was all bollocks, it just made such a difference. And occasionally we chatted while we did it. So having someone else, whether it's in the room and being quiet or virtually on Zoom, I found that very, very helpful at times. I know people who've completed books, people with ADHD have written books by just having someone sit on the end of Zoom. So highly recommend.
Just to mention that I never thought about that, but I use something similar as well. However, the group and chatting doesn't work for me. So I use a service it's called FocusMate. Hopefully it's okay to mention it, because it's a one-to-one, and all it happens is we show up, we declare our goals, we get to work, and then at the end we check in and kind of swap tips and experiences. And that has definitely improved my work from home flow as well.
Any other questions?
This question is for Irina. You know, for us probably it's best to work from home because one of the main advantages is dropping our mask. And I'm talking about masking for autistics and camouflaging. One of the main source of our mental health problems. So what would you think that would be best, or what do you think will be the best environment at work if it's not at home for us to work without the mask?
So just to kind of give a little bit of a definition of what masking is, thanks, Nuria, this is a very, very good question. Masking it's a conscious or unconscious way in which we suppress our autistic traits, and I have done it successfully for years. I'm not sure I have a good answer. I might have to think about it and come back to you.
It's maybe kind of, from my perspective, it's something we talk about when we talk with employers, where masking is something that's predominantly associated with people that identify as women, and sort of that's some of the reasons why there are less women that are diagnosed as having autism and ADHD, due to things like masking as well. But I would hope probably for people that are listening to like kind of the tips that you recommended, how to support people, kind of creating a safe environment can help people, because if you go into an environment and you are being supported, you don't need to be someone else. And I've always viewed it, if someone has to mask every day, every week, every month, it's going to have a cumulative impact, which leads to, as you spoke about earlier, things like burnout, mental health challenges and barriers. And hopefully some of the tips people recommended today and just thinking about our environments can really help probably tackle some of the masking challenges for some people, I think.
I guess awareness and acceptance, because there is a lot of stigma still and stereotypes around autism, and because women straight are not very well known either. But yeah, that's a long conversation, sorry.
I suppose as you kind of touched on, the reality almost force of that diagnostic kind of difference, that kind of 3 to 1, is again, the traits are looked at as what's it in young boys, what is it in men? That meaning so many people aren't being picked up and they've had to mask through school, through university, through work, through life, to God knows what age in some cases, and that has had an impact in not getting that kind of support. Masking is certainly something that is just, it's still a huge, huge problem, and that's why so many people are not getting the key being picked up at younger ages, for sure.
I'm not masking because I don't do that thing. There is, yes, it has to be open, supportive environments where people are willing to talk about these things. We have a thing at home, which is Jen's going to have some big feelings. So emotional regulation is a thing for people with ADHD. And I can feel it coming. It's like something's about to get launched. we've learned over time that I'm allowed to go, it's going to get messy and you're going to feel sad to all the people I live with, so that we've got a barrier that says, I'm going to be a dick, but is it okay? It does require that open, authentic kind of environment in the first place. But if you can get to that point, you can start to talk about, potentially, maybe talk about this is masking and this is not masking, so people understand it more.
Yeah. Sometimes I've seen it where managers have sometimes said, oh, what do I say to that person? Are they coming across, are they being rude, or are they just being really honest? And it's like, sometimes the blend between the two and so on.
Just as I thought of something, sorry, it might not be a direct answer to this question, because it is very complex, but I was thinking of the time when I felt like I could be myself at work, and it was working in a team that was very diverse. And although it didn't start at first, I gradually thought, oh, there's other people here that might be neurodivergent. So I think that is the environment where, I eventually could feel like not masking necessarily in very diverse teams.
So I actually think you circled around very nicely to the question I was going to ask, which is, we're speaking about having managers that understand us and safe spaces. How would you want to either approach the conversation, if you are still masking or perhaps haven't had that conversation with your firm or your manager, how would you either A, want to talk to your manager about that, maybe if you're not so confident, or B, have your manager maybe try and approach it with you?
I, again, don't know the answer, but I'm a people pleaser, so I have to give you an answer. I think there are tools that can be used. It's one of the places where things like coaching and mentoring can come in, so having qualified as a coach and being coached as well. Talking that conversation through with someone is actually quite helpful, where you get to think about what you're going to say and what someone else might say back. So a little bit of preparation for it. And you maybe, if you fake a conversation with someone you do feel in a safe space with, you go, yeah, I'm not doing this in real life. There's nothing wrong with that. You've had that experience in a safe space as kind of a way of prepping it. I guess if you're asking, like, how would a manager approach it if they think they need to have that conversation? Was that the second part of your question?
I think more like, if you want to have the conversation, how would you go about instigating it? Or if you think maybe your manager is trying to have the conversation with you, how would you be like, don't worry, it's not you. But also maybe it is.
So my tip would be preparation for that. I'm hyper, so I just, once I found that I had the diagnosis, I literally did the thing I told everybody. I know it's not that easy for some people, so definitely find your safe space, run it through with somebody, and think about what the possible outcomes and how you feel about those things are, and that just might make it easier. How you then open it, whether it's you just do what I do, walk desk, go, funny story, that's one way. You might want to do it a bit more formally though.
Point of view, I've kind of seen it over the years. I used to support like a lot of autistic people into roles in tech, and the biggest challenge sometimes with tech was, as they touched on earlier, like CVs and cover letters. Where is your chance to disclose on that? Whereas like places like, say, for example, the NHS and perhaps larger organisations, quality form filling, like, I have a disability, I have a health condition, tick, and that automatically begins a process where you don't have to send an email, knock on someone's door, like that kicks off that process. And technically a manager cannot ask you, oh, like, have you got ADHD? Like, you cannot ask that. The person needs to broach that. And like, we do quite a lot of workshops with managers, and what we say is, you can be maybe curious if someone is. What you should do is create a safe space and environment, like listen, take an interest, care, ask if there's things that you can do for people, and hopefully by doing that, someone feels comfortable to go, oh, recently received a diagnosis for ADHD, or this might be something that I think I am, and begin that kind of process and so on. But fundamentally, the recruitment process for most places is so broken that what should be nice at the beginning of, you apply, you tick that you have something, someone reaches out, what adjustments do you need for the interview? Come on in, here's your questions in advance. Oh, welcome to our business. What do you need before day one in terms of technology, support, things that we should make for you? What adjustments do you need before you come in on day one? That simple little box makes such a difference and takes away the pressure on someone being the one to have to speak out.
thank you.
Anyone else got?
Yeah, basically, what you said, that it was kind of like a boiling after I got it, and then reached a pressure point where I just told everyone. But like, I told my manager first, but the way like he acted, I knew like he's very open and understanding, so I knew that I wouldn't have to really worry. It's kind of like the story earlier when I looked up, should you tell your manager? It says no, but my manager is very nice, so I was like, yeah, might as well go for it.
Probably sometimes the best answer. I've seen it before. People are like, oh, someone disclosed to me. I've done my job as a manager, when the next bit should be, oh, what do you need now? Or, you know, have that conversation about what follows up from that, as opposed to telling someone, which is great, here's a bit about me, but actually I want to have a conversation and get some extra support or a bit of understanding, etc. That's, I would probably recommend that follow-up question, which I think one of you's mentioned earlier, of like, oh, here's things I need, help have that conversation.
Yeah, so when we were talking about disclosure there, having disclosed in the past to bosses, managers, or you often come across a fear because the fear of the unknown, they don't understand it, they don't want to understand it, whatever. So what I wanted to know was, in a kind of changing hearts and minds kind of way, have you got any good examples or nice examples, really, I suppose, of where people have said, oh, I love that you've got ADHD, or I love that you're autistic. This is really cool. You've done, you know, because there is a kind of, as I've found when disclosing it, you need to try and, people are asking you to sell yourself on what it is that's different about you. And it's sometimes quite difficult in the moment to say, well, I'm quite creative, or I'm more creative than you, because you can't obviously say that. But you might think in a different way. So therefore, just having that different perspective is obviously, as you said earlier, a good way of approaching problem solving a different way. So I just wanted to know if you had any like nice stories where people have been excited about it. That was all.
When I sort of started telling people I had ADHD, I had a couple of co-workers actually come up and be like, oh, like, I'm glad you've sort of come out and said that I have ADHD, or like I have this other thing that's different, and it's nice to know that it's not like just me that's slightly different. So yeah.
I haven't been so successful yet, but I'm perseverant. I guess what I try is always to give people gradual information to it depends really. Like I have spoken to people that were maybe not knowledgeable, but they would be interested or curious. So again, there's the difference between somebody who you can quite inform or get to a level of understanding quite fast, as opposed to not, or quite a bit of a challenge. I haven't quite worked out all of these aspects, but I'm sure I will find some sort of framework or system, because that's how I like to operate. And then hopefully I can share with other people as well.
Does family count? When I told my daughter, she was kind of on her diagnosis path, and predictably, because she's got ADHD, has never finished it. She kind of found out before me, and this happens to a lot of older people, is when you've got kids, you go, oh, interesting. So when I got my diagnosis and I said to my daughter, I've got ADHD, she's like, does this mean you'll stop getting on at me about things? It's like, no, that doesn't change anything. I think, like Irina, I haven't had as many like fully wholesome, positive, wow, you've opened up a whole thing for me. A thing that did work was I started talking about executive function as like an educational explanatory thing, and kind of did sessions. And when people came to those, that they kind of went, oh, holy shit, now it makes more sense. So they didn't get anything from me doing it as a person, but when I did it as like here, I've got slides, apparently they connected with that better. So maybe do slides.
The guy in the white top with the cool glasses. Oh, I think there was someone else just in the back as well.
Yeah, you've talked a bit about mentoring. I was just wanting to know what you think, how you would describe a good mentor or an effective mentor, and how you might best get one of those?
For me, it was a big challenge to get a mentor. I've tried LinkedIn, conversation would go, oh yeah, it sounds exciting, I think I might help you, and then never heard back. And because I can't understand what happened, is it me? I would never follow up. So the thing that worked for me was to go into finding these formal programs for mentoring. And that is where I started to, because you get paired, basically. There's a system around a formal mentoring program where you get paired with a mentor. And at first, again, it was a hit and miss because I wasn't necessarily knowing. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know how to utilize the mentoring sessions either. So it was a gradual progression of understanding. And as I progressed in my understanding of myself and what I'm looking for and how I want these sessions to be and what I want to get from them, I gradually got to be paired with better mentors that were better fit. Does that kind of answer your question? But the formal mentoring programs, I would look for something like that.
I kind of just finished being a mentor to someone that's autistic at Abertay University, that I was paired with them. And I've always found, perhaps in my role as a mentor, often people will have received a diagnosis, but there's never the follow-up of like, oh, here's a list of things that you can get access to services, here's adjustments you can get interviews. Like there's almost this gatekeeping that just like select people know how to help you with certain things. And kind of my role was helping someone that was graduating and going, oh, here's things that you can get for going to your interviews. See for this application form or various different things, just like doing that knowledge transfer to go, here's things that you kind of hoped someone else would have had that conversation with you. It's not happened. And my role, I mean, he was like a cybersecurity person, which I know next to nothing about, but I could help that person navigate that world with some of the support that I knew existed out there because no one was telling people that it was there. So I think that matching can work in so many different ways as well. And I think there's...
Thank you. Was it? Oh, yeah, there you go.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for all your studies and sharing your experience. I work for Lloyds Banking Group, and I'm probably not the favorite person because I'm working in recruitment. But I'm super lucky that at Lloyds we are investing lots of time and money into changing processes. It's still evolving, lots of education. But I'm lucky to be and really proud to be representing the neurodiversity and disability panel for colleagues within the group. And I know, and I had lots of negative experience going through interview processes myself. I'm kind of now creating a book of case studies for our recruitment teams, giving like a tiny little snippets of like positive examples of how we can adjust processes. So I would love to think you had some positive experiences in your career when something worked or someone listened to you or someone let you do your own thing. So what that would be, just so I can take it back and tell them, listen, this is another idea what we could do.
So can I start? So I'm thinking of one thing now actually that made a huge difference was, so when you have one stage, the stage where you're talking to the hiring manager, for example, or a group of people, it depends from each company, I guess. For me, what mattered was to have representation in that. So if there was 3 people that were interviewing me, if they were all men versus if there was a woman, and bonus points if there was somebody who was neurodivergent and opened about being neurodivergent. And one of the last experience I've had was interviewing with a hiring manager that was neurodivergent and open about neurodivergence, and that was definitely something that I never experienced before.
Yes, on the back of that, we do make sure, regardless of who's interviewing, we do have diverse panels there will always be a female and male, and we'll try to do racial diversities, whatever. The probably problem we are facing to help people more is that people still don't want to disclose because obviously all the negative experiences. So how as an organization we can encourage people more and more to disclose, because as soon as I know, then exactly how Lee said, I can get in touch with you and say what reasonable adjustment we can do.
Instead of potentially asking what neurodiversity someone has, maybe have a list of accommodations that you can select from, rather than asking someone to disclose when they might not want to, because not everyone does want to disclose. So maybe having reasonable adjustments, but for everyone, doesn't matter if you have neurodiversity.
Yes, we do have the disability confidence scheme, or whatever it's called, where you can just tick yes without disclosing what it is.
But it's having like a list of like the accommodations and people getting to check them off, like, oh, I would like this, I would like that, and it's for anyone, because then it's not so much they're disclosing, it's more these are what they would like during the interview.
And what that would be from your experience?
Making sure it's like a quiet space. Yeah, can't really think of anything on the spot, but yeah.
One of the ones that's such a broad topic, because everyone, like, I would even say, like, you level the playing field, everyone gets the questions in advance, and it's one of those ones that used to be the rubbish, oh, it's unfair, like someone that is autistic is getting the questions when I'm not getting the questions, when actually it just levels the playing field, for example. And there's so many adjustments. They say somewhere quiet, maybe that you come in slightly later in the day if you've had medication in the morning, for example. You can dial in instead of like a typical interview about like, tell us what you did in group work, what about this, just like hearing about someone's experiences, or maybe doing sort of like kind of like a test instead of something where it's like, how would you tackle this banking challenge? Off you go and do something like that. Even things where it's like building extra time in to think about what the question's been asked, or to think about the challenge, etc. It's usually the rule of thumb's like 5 minutes per half an hour, for example. But what you often find is people that maybe didn't get that at university don't know they've got that when it comes to recruitment, and they can't follow through that thread of, I got this at university, I can now take this into employment, I can take this into my job. I think that causes a disconnect, but I've got your details, so like we could maybe touch base. And I'm doing similar work with another organisation at the moment. I'm just aware there's horses outside, but like we can maybe touch base about that.
I do have a good example from recently on the questions thing, because I kept ticking my little disability confidence box and it kept saying, what the adjustments you want? Give me the questions. Oh, it's competency based and give us a star answer. Yeah, that's not giving me the questions. One company out of maybe 5 has said the questions will be, it was something like developing talent, driving performance, and another thing. And they were thematic, but it's like, that's all I needed, not this, it'll be a competency-based and you've got no preparation other than that. That's the first time I've seen it, but that was brilliant. And I think, although I agree, level the playing field for everybody gets that. I think if you do things thematically, then it doesn't feel like you're completely spoon feeding, and it gives people a little bit more range as well as to what competency or what answer they would give. So I've seen that this week, and that made me happy.
So we do provide questions.
Yeah. So do you do the fully, like the complete detailed question?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, then you're.
Works out best for managers. You don't have someone in front of you. Like everyone struggles with interviews, but people some more so. And just like, here's a question. I need to think about it. What's my best answer? Would you not, as a manager, just want someone that's thought about it and went, actually, here's a really good example of something I've done, and you can judge that person fairly of like, actually, X did better, but at least as you as a hiring manager goes, good, I can judge that fairly, which seems to just, again, even up the playing field a bit.
Just another really quick idea to your point about encouraging disclosure. One thing that helped me answer a lot of my questions and become more confident in my autistic identity was hearing other people's lived experiences and resonating with that. So another kind of idea that I have in my mind, but this is a bit, I'm not sure when we'll get there, but you can sometimes observe, especially with people that are autistic and would be going into an autistic burnout. So a more proactive, potentially a more proactive approach into kind of talking about with people about their well-being, and that is maybe another way in which you can help people understand certain things about themselves. But that's still very much in research and kind of trying to formalize certain things about autistic burnout and how it presents itself into the workplace.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for all your questions.